Hi, it's Julia here, and welcome back to the English Talk community, your space to grow, learn, and feel more confident with your English. Whether you're walking, driving, cleaning the house, or just sitting with your headphones in, I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're going to talk about something very real, something that many learners experience but don't always know how to explain. It's that frustrating, uncomfortable, and confusing feeling of being stuck in intermediate English. Have you felt that way recently? Like you've made some progress, maybe even a lot, but now it feels like you're not moving forward anymore. You're not a beginner, that's clear. But you're not fluent yet either. You're somewhere in the middle, and it feels like you've been stuck there for a long time. Let me tell you something important right now. That stuck feeling doesn't mean you're failing. It means you've reached a plateau, and that is a normal, natural part of learning. Every skill has it. Runners, musicians, chefs, public speakers, they all hit plateaus. What matters is what you do when you're in that space. So let's begin by just recognizing it. If you're listening to this and thinking, yes, that's exactly how I feel, then take a deep breath and know this. You're not alone, and there is a way forward. I want to start by asking you a few questions, just for you to reflect on. No pressure, just think about it honestly. Do you feel like you keep watching or reading English content but still struggle to speak with confidence? Do you find yourself avoiding conversations in English even though you understand most of what people say? Do you feel frustrated because you've been studying for months, maybe years, but still hesitate when someone asks you a simple question in English? If any of these sound like you, then this episode was made for you. And listen, I get it. You've probably been working really hard. You might have taken classes, watched hundreds of hours of videos, even passed some exams. And now you're wondering, why do I still feel stuck? Why isn't my English getting better? At least not the way I expected. The answer is not always more vocabulary or more grammar rules. Sometimes what you need is a different approach, a different mindset, and a few simple shifts in your daily routine that can reignite your progress. Before we go deeper, I want to remind you of something. Learning English is not a race. It's not about how fast you can reach the finish line because, honestly, there is no finish line. Even native speakers are still learning their language every day. The key is to keep going, to stay consistent, and to trust the process. But more than that, it's to stay flexible. If one method isn't working for you anymore, it's okay to change. In fact, change might be exactly what you need. Now, let's talk about something I see all the time. A learner reaches the intermediate level and thinks, okay, now I just need to keep doing what I've been doing and I'll become fluent. But then, months go by, and progress slows down. Motivation drops, confidence fades. And here's why. What got you to intermediate English won't necessarily get you to fluency. The tools and habits that helped you start your journey might not be the same ones that take you to the next level. And that's not your fault. It's part of the process. But the longer you stay with old strategies, the more you start to feel stuck. One big reason learners feel stuck is because they rely too much on passive learning, watching, reading, listening, but not enough active use of the language. You understand everything in a podcast, but when someone asks you a question in real life, your mind goes blank. That's not a language problem. That's a practice problem. You need safe, low-pressure opportunities to use your English. Even talking to yourself for 5 minutes a day can begin to change that. Yes, I'm serious. Talking to yourself out loud, narrating your day, or practicing little dialogues can wake up your speaking brain in a way that no video or textbook ever could. Another common issue is the fear of making mistakes. Maybe you've been learning English in a way that focuses too much on being correct and not enough on being clear. So when it's time to speak, you freeze. You overthink. You try to remember every rule, every pronunciation guide, and suddenly the words just don't come out. Let me tell you something important here. Fluency doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from using what you have right now with confidence. And confidence grows when you stop worrying about being right and start focusing on being understood. You might also be stuck because you've created a routine that's too comfortable. Maybe you always watch the same kind of content. You listen to the same type of podcast or follow the same study method. And for a while that worked. But now, your brain is no longer being challenged. Learning happens when your brain is just a little uncomfortable, just a little stretched. So if you're feeling too relaxed in your English learning, that might be a sign that it's time to push yourself again. Try reading something more complex, Listen to a show without subtitles. Practice speaking about topics you're not used. 2. Growth doesn't come from doing the same thing. It comes from doing the next thing. And here's one more thing I want you to think about. Are you waiting for the perfect moment to use your English? Some people tell themselves, I'll speak when I feel ready. But readiness doesn't come before action. It comes from action. If you wait until you feel fluent, confident, and perfect, you'll never speak. But if you start speaking now, even with mistakes, you will begin to feel fluent and confident. Over time. It's a cycle, and you control it. Speak to a friend, record yourself, join a small conversation group, take a chance. You don't have to be perfect to be understood. You just have to start. Now, if you're nodding your head right now or thinking this sounds like me, then I want you to know something. You are already on the right path. You're listening, you're reflecting, and that means you're ready to grow. You don't have to change everything overnight. Just try one new thing. Make one small change this week. Maybe it's 5 minutes of speaking aloud every morning. Maybe it's writing a short journal entry in English each night. Maybe it's switching your favorite app or podcast to English and just listening a little more every day. You don't need big, dramatic changes. You just need small, consistent ones. And hey, if this podcast is helping you in any way, if it's giving you motivation, clarity, or a sense of connection, I'd love it if you'd follow us or give this episode a like. That simple action tells us that we're creating something valuable, and it helps other learners around the world find this content too. We're building something together here, a global community of people who are learning English with heart, courage, and persistence. You're a part of that. Let's keep growing, one step at a time. You're not stuck. You're just ready for something new. Let me tell you about someone I spoke with recently, Matteo, a 29-year-old software engineer living in Milan. He's smart, motivated, and has been learning English for several years now. He's also the kind of person who does everything right, at least according to most language learning advice. Every morning before work, he spends 30 minutes watching English language YouTube channels, mostly tech, productivity, and development tutorials. He reads articles online. He even has a grammar workbook that he uses during the weekends, going through the rules and doing the exercises carefully. On paper, it looks great. He's putting in the time. He's showing discipline. He's staying consistent. But when it came time to actually use English, when he had to lead a Zoom call with colleagues from London, Berlin, and Seoul, he completely froze. Not just nervous, but silent. He later told me that his heart was racing, his mind went blank, and even the simplest sentences felt impossible. I know this stuff, he said, but when I had to speak, it all disappeared. Can you relate to that? Because a lot of people can. Matteo is not alone. His story is actually incredibly common. I hear it again and again. People who consume a lot of English but still struggle to speak. They know the grammar. They understand most conversations. They've spent hours watching videos or reading in English. But when it's time to actually talk, whether it's in a meeting, an interview, a casual chat, they get stuck. It feels like everything they've learned just disappears. That's not about knowledge, that's about use. And that's the key to today's story. Matteo was learning English every day, but he wasn't using it. Not really. Watching a video or reading an article might feel like practice, but it's still passive learning. It's input. You're receiving information. But language is not only about input, it's about output too. You need to use the language you're learning, even in simple ways. Because fluency doesn't grow from what you understand, it grows from what you do with what you understand. So I asked Matteo a few questions. When was the last time you spoke English out loud, outside of a meeting? When did you last write something in English without a grammar book telling you what to say? When did you last use your English for real communication, even if it was just with yourself? He thought about it, and then he laughed a little. I guess I haven't, he said. And that right there is the gap. It's the gap between learning about a language and actually living in it, even just a little. This gap is what creates the feeling of being stuck. When your input increases but your output stays low, the balance is off. You feel like you should be improving, but your performance doesn't show it. It's frustrating. It makes you question whether all the time you've spent learning was worth it. But it was. The input matters. The problem is that input alone isn't enough. You've built a strong foundation. Now it's time to activate it. I encouraged Matteo to start speaking English for 5 minutes a day. Just 5. Nothing formal, nothing complicated. Just talk out loud while making coffee. Describe what he's doing. Talk about his plans for the day. Imagine explaining a project to a client, whatever comes to mind. The goal isn't perfection, it's activity. It's turning knowledge into action. I also asked him to try writing a short journal entry in English each night. Not a big essay. Just a paragraph or two about how his day went or what he's thinking about. Again, the goal isn't correct grammar, it's expression. It's showing his brain that English isn't just a subject, it's a tool he can use. Within 2 weeks, Matteo sent me a voice message. His voice was a little shaky at first, but he was speaking. Full sentences, natural pauses. Some mistakes, sure, but more importantly, he sounded like someone who was trying and not just studying. He told me it was awkward in the beginning. He felt silly talking to himself in English in the kitchen. But after a few days, it became normal. He even started having mini conversations with himself while walking to work. He didn't need a partner or a classroom to practice, he just needed to start using what he already knew. The most powerful thing Matteo said to me was this. I realized I was waiting for permission to speak English. I thought I had to reach a certain level before I could use it. But now I know I should have started earlier. That's such an important insight. So many learners feel they need to earn the right to speak. But that's not how language works. You don't get fluent and then start speaking. You get fluent by speaking. And look, I know it's not always easy. Speaking a second language can feel vulnerable. You worry about sounding strange or making mistakes or not finding the right words. But here's the thing. The more you wait to feel ready, the longer you stay stuck. Confidence doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built one word at a time, one sentence at a time. Even if you're just talking to yourself, you're practicing the mental process of forming ideas in English. And that's exactly what prepares you for real conversations later on. Matteo also realized that his study routine had become a kind of hiding place. Watching videos made him feel productive. Reading articles made him feel informed. But none of it challenged him to do anything with the language. That's why he felt safe, but also stuck. Passive learning is comfortable. Active use is uncomfortable. But guess where the growth happens? In the discomfort. So here's the invitation. If you're listening right now and thinking, I do the same thing as Matteo, then maybe it's time to shift the balance. Keep watching your videos, keep reading your articles, but add something new. Speak out loud for 5 minutes a day. Write a few lines in a notebook. Record your voice and play it back. Try to use the words you already know instead of chasing. More and more vocabulary. You don't need more knowledge. You need more usage. There's no perfect moment to begin. You don't need a perfect accent or perfect grammar to start. What you need is to give yourself permission. Like Matteo did. He didn't need a teacher to tell him when to start. He just started. And that small shift made all the difference. Because once you begin using your English, even in private, something changes. The language stops being something you study and starts becoming something you live. And when that happens, the progress comes back. The confidence builds. The words get easier to find. Not because you've suddenly learned something new, but because you're finally using what was inside you all along. I want to share a story that might feel very familiar to you. It's about Anukica, a 34-year-old marketing analyst from Delhi. When I first met her, she had already been living and working in Singapore for over 3 years. Her job involved a lot of written communication in English, emails, reports, presentations. She handled all of that just fine. Her coworkers respected her work, and she was clearly smart and capable. But something was missing. During coffee, breaks, or lunch conversations, Anukica would sit quietly, smiling politely, nodding when others spoke, but never really joining in. She felt invisible in social moments. And not because she didn't understand, but because she was afraid to speak. She told me, I always worry that I'll say something wrong or sound stupid or that people will laugh. And even though nobody had ever made fun of her, that fear was enough to keep her silent. Every time she thought about speaking up, her mind would start racing. What if I make a grammar mistake? What if they don't understand me? What if I freeze halfway through a sentence? So instead, she stayed quiet. Day after day. Week after week. And over time, that silence became a habit, a safe place, but also a cage. I've heard this story in different forms from people all over the world. Fear of making mistakes is one of the biggest barriers to speaking a new language. And it's not about knowledge, because Anukica's English was solid. She could write clearly, read fluently, and follow meetings with no problem. But that fear of sounding wrong was stronger than her ability. It made her feel like she had to reach some invisible standard before she was allowed to join the conversation. This mindset is more common than you might think. A lot of learners believe that fluency means no mistakes, that they need to be perfect before they speak. And I understand where that comes from. In school, we're often taught that mistakes are bad, tests are marked in red, wrong answers lower your grade. So we grow up afraid of being wrong. But language doesn't work like math. It's not about solving for the correct answer. It's about connecting with people, communicating ideas, expressing who you are. Anukica wasn't stuck because she didn't know enough English. She was stuck because she was trying to protect herself from embarrassment. And that's completely human. But if you want to grow in a language, you have to be willing to look a little silly sometimes. You have to be okay with making imperfect sentences, using the wrong word, or getting stuck halfway. Because that's how fluency is built. In the mess, not in the perfection. So I asked Anukica to try something small, nothing dramatic. I told her, next time you're in the break room, just say one thing, a comment about the weather, a question about someone's weekend, a compliment on a colleague's outfit. Just one short sentence, even if it's not perfect. She looked nervous, but agreed to try. A few days later, she sent me a message. She had done it. She asked her teammate how his morning had been, and he responded with a smile and asked about hers. Just like that, a normal, human moment. It wasn't complicated. She didn't use big words or perfect grammar, but it was real. And most importantly, nothing bad happened. Nobody laughed, nobody corrected her. They just talked. And that tiny success gave her a little bit of courage for next time. That's how it starts. Not with long speeches or flawless grammar, but with one brave sentence, then another, and another. Confidence doesn't appear out of nowhere. It's built through action, through trying, failing a little, trying again. Through learning that mistakes are just part of the process, not a sign of failure. Anukica also started changing the way she thought about her goal. She had been aiming for correctness, for speaking without errors. But I asked her to shift her focus to aim for connection instead. If someone understands your message, that's a win. If you can share a laugh, give an opinion, or ask a question, even with mistakes, that's communication. And that's what language is for. So many learners carry this heavy pressure to sound native, to get everything right. But I want you to know something. Native speakers make mistakes all the time. They pause, correct themselves, forget words, mix things up. What makes them fluent is not perfection. It's comfort with the language. They trust that even if they mess up, they can keep going. And you can learn that too. One day, Anukica told me something that stayed with me. She said, I used to think that mistakes meant I wasn't good enough. Now I think they mean I'm actually learning. That mindset shift changed everything. For her. She started speaking more. Little by little, her confidence grew. She began sharing ideas in meetings, asking questions, even making jokes. And yes, sometimes her sentences weren't perfect, but nobody cared. People appreciated her voice, her presence. She felt like she belonged. So let me ask you this. What are you holding back because of fear? Is there something you wanted to say but didn't because you thought you'd mess it up? What would happen if you said it anyway? What if, instead of trying to be perfect, you tried to be brave? Because bravery is what moves you forward. Not correctness, not perfect grammar, just the courage to speak, even when your voice shakes. Here's something practical you can do. Pick one moment each day to say something out loud in English, even if it's just to yourself. Practice being okay with the mistakes. Talk to your reflection. Say your grocery list. Describe your surroundings. Tell a short story from your day. The goal isn't to speak perfectly, it's to speak. Start messy. Start simple, but start. Because the longer you wait for perfection, the longer you stay silent. And if someone corrects you, that's a gift. It means they're helping you grow. If someone doesn't understand you the first time, try again. Use simpler words. Use gestures. Smile. Language is more than just grammar. It's a bridge between people. So walk across it, even if your steps aren't perfect yet. I told Anukica something I'll tell you now. English is not a test. It's a tool. You don't need to use it perfectly. You just need to use it. And every time you do, no matter how small, you're building fluency, not by avoiding mistakes, but by embracing them. Because mistakes are not the enemy. Silence is. And you're not here to stay silent. You're here to speak. I want to talk about something that might surprise you, because it doesn't feel like a problem at first. It feels like success. It feels like progress. And in some ways, it is. But it's also where a lot of English learners stop growing. I'm talking about the comfort zone of intermediate English. That place where things feel fine. You can follow along. You understand most of what people say. You can read articles, watch YouTube videos, listen to podcasts like this one, maybe even write emails at work or chat with colleagues. And because things are good enough, you stop pushing yourself. I've seen this pattern so many times. A learner reaches a point where English is no longer scary, and that's great. You've worked hard to get here. But now what? Comfort. Feels safe, but it can also become a trap. Improvement slows down. You stop noticing your mistakes. You repeat the same phrases over and over. You understand others, but still hesitate to express your own ideas in a natural way. You might even feel like you're stuck, but not because you're doing something wrong. You're stuck because you're not doing anything new. Let me tell you about Ivan, a 36-year-old sales manager from Warsaw. He told me, "I feel like I've hit a wall. I don't know what to study next." I asked him to describe his daily English routine. He said he watched a lot of tech videos in English on YouTube, always with subtitles. He followed 3 podcasts, including this one. He read news articles in English every morning. That all sounded great. But then I asked, "When was the last time you spoke English?" He thought for a moment and said, "Maybe 2 weeks ago, during a short client call." That's when I realized what was happening. Ivan was doing all the right things, but only the comfortable things. He was surrounding himself with English, but not challenging himself with it. He understood a lot, but wasn't using it in active ways. So I asked him to change just one part of his routine. I said, "Next time you watch a YouTube video, turn off the subtitles. Listen first. Then repeat some of the sentences out loud. Try to copy the speaker's rhythm, not just the words." That small change made a big difference. He messaged me a week later and said, "I had to really listen. I noticed new sounds I'd never heard before. And repeating the lines helped me speak more clearly." This is what happens when you leave the comfort zone. It's not always dramatic. You don't have to move to another country or take a difficult test. You just need to change how you use the language. Passive input, like reading or watching, is good. But active engagement, like speaking, shadowing, or writing, leads to real growth. If everything you do in English feels easy, it means it's time to stretch a little further. Here's something you can try today. Pick a short video or podcast clip, no more than 2 minutes. Play a few seconds, then pause and repeat exactly what you hear. Try to match the speaker's tone and pace. This technique is called shadowing. It's powerful because it connects your listening and speaking skills. You'll start to hear the natural patterns of English, and your brain will begin to copy them more easily. At first, it feels strange, maybe even frustrating, but that's good. That's the feeling of growth. Another thing you can do is read out loud. Find an article, a blog post, or even a page from a book. Don't just read silently, speak the I words. This builds your pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence. You'll start to notice how sentences are built, how punctuation affects tone, how words connect. Reading out loud might feel silly if you're alone, but I promise, it's one of the most effective habits you can develop. Just 5 minutes a day can make a real difference. You can also challenge yourself by switching off subtitles. I know, that one is tough. Subtitles feel helpful, And they are, at the beginning. But at some point, they become a crutch. They stop you from listening carefully. When you remove them, your brain has to work harder. It has to focus on the sounds, the meaning, the context. It's like exercising a muscle. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but it gets stronger with time. And here's the most important part. Don't wait until you feel ready to take on a new challenge. You'll never feel completely ready. Growth always involves some discomfort. You'll make mistakes. You'll feel confused. That's all part of it. But every time you try something new, you open the door to the next level of fluency. It's not about doing everything perfectly, it's about doing something differently. Think about your current English habits. Are they helping you grow or just keeping you busy? Are you using the language in new ways or just repeating old routines? It's okay to enjoy the comfort of intermediate English for a while. But if you want to keep improving, you have to step out of that comfort zone. Not all the time, just enough to stretch. Enough to feel a little uncertain, a little challenged, a little excited. I remember talking to Fatima, a nurse from Casablanca who had been working in London for 2 years. Her English was solid, but she felt like she wasn't improving anymore. She said, "I speak the same phrases every day. How are you feeling? Take a deep breath. Are you in pain? I want to speak more naturally, but I don't know how." I asked her what she did after work. She said she liked to watch TV dramas. So I suggested something simple. Watch one scene without subtitles, then try to retell what happened in English. Out loud. Like you're telling a friend. That exercise helped her move beyond basic phrases. She began describing characters, expressing opinions, even trying to imitate their expressions. It felt playful, and it helped her feel more like herself in English. That's the key. Fluency is not just about understanding, it's about expressing yourself. Not just in safe, familiar ways, but in deeper, more personal ways. And to do that, you need to be willing to step into discomfort. To make space for mistakes, awkward pauses, and slow sentences. Because every one of those moments is a step forward. So wherever you are in your journey, whether you're reading, watching, or listening, ask yourself, what's one small thing I can do today that feels a little uncomfortable? That's your next step. That's how you grow. Not by staying where you are, but by reaching a little further than yesterday. Have you ever had one of those days when you feel like you're being productive in English? Maybe you watched a full episode of a show, read a few pages of an article, scrolled through an English language blog, and yet, at the end of the day, your English doesn't feel any stronger? You're not alone. I want to talk to you about something that might be holding you back without you even realizing it. It's the trap of consuming too much and creating too little. Now, don't get me wrong. Watching, reading, listening, these are all important parts of language learning. They expose you to vocabulary, natural rhythm, grammar in use. But here's the problem. If all you do is consume and never create, you won't build real fluency. Fluency lives in output, in what you say, write, explain, or express in your own words. And if you're not actively producing English, your brain stays passive. It's like reading about how to swim without ever jumping into the water. Let me tell you about Sophia, a 25-year-old from Madrid who sent me a long message last year. She said, "Julia, I don't understand. I spend at least an hour a day watching videos in English. I listen to your podcast every week. I follow English creators on Instagram. But when I try to speak, I freeze. Why is that happening?" I asked her a simple question. What do you do with all the English you consume? She paused, then replied, "Well, I don't really do anything. I just listen and try to understand." That was the moment things clicked. Understanding is a great foundation, but it's not the final goal. If you want to use English in real conversations, you have to start using it now, not just waiting until you know enough. The truth is, we often feel busy with English because we're surrounded by it. But being surrounded isn't the same as being involved. If English is always coming in but never going out, your growth gets stuck. Let's think about your own routine. Maybe you listen to podcasts while cooking, or watch English YouTubers after work, or read news articles on your commute. That's all valuable, but I want to challenge you to take one small step further. For every 10 minutes of input, spend at least 2 minutes creating. You don't need fancy tools. You don't need a partner. You just need to activate your brain and move from passive to active learning. Here's what that can look like. After watching a video, pause and summarize it out loud. Not word for word, just say in your own English what you understood. Even if it's basic, even if you stumble, that moment of speaking makes a difference. Or after reading a short article, write 2 sentences about what you found interesting. Not a full essay, just your thoughts. You can even record yourself talking about it. Play it back. Notice your voice, your rhythm, the way your words come out. You're not just reviewing content, you're building your fluency muscle. When I first shared this idea on the podcast a while ago, I got a message from Naoko, a graphic designer from Tokyo. She said she used to listen to English podcasts every morning but felt like nothing was changing. Then she tried something simple. After each episode, she would write 3 sentences in her notebook. What she learned, what she liked, and 1 word she didn't know. That's it, 3 sentences. And guess what? She said within 2 weeks, her confidence started growing. She felt more connected to the language. Why? Because now her brain was not just receiving, but responding. Another listener, Diego, who lives in Mexico City, told me he started a voice diary. After watching an English video, he would record himself speaking for 1 minute. No script, no pressure, just raw thoughts. At first, he said it felt awkward. He didn't know what to say, but he kept going. And soon, he started noticing patterns in his speech, repeated words, hesitations, new expressions that came more naturally. The act of speaking, not perfectly, but consistently, helped him move forward. This is what I want for you. Not more time in English, but better time in English. Learning is not just about how much you consume, it's about what you do with it. Creating doesn't mean writing essays or giving speeches. It means expressing something, no matter how small. A sentence, a question, a comment. It's in those moments that English becomes yours. You see, when you create with English, you tell your brain, this is not just something I understand. It's something I can use. And that makes all the difference. You stop waiting for the perfect moment to speak. You stop worrying about sounding smart. You start getting used to your own voice in English. And little by little, your fluency begins to grow. Let's make it practical. Choose one thing today. Maybe you'll record a 30-second summary of a video you watched. Or write a quick journal entry about your morning in English. Or even talk to yourself while washing the dishes. Yes, talk to yourself. Describe what you're doing. Say what you're thinking. Use the English you already know. Don't aim for perfect grammar. Aim for expression. That's what fluency is built on. I always say, fluency is not something you find at the end of the road. It's something you build on the road. Every time you create, you lay another brick. It's not fast, it's not flashy, but it's real. And it adds up. When you move from consuming to creating, everything changes. You stop feeling like a student and start feeling like a communicator. You stop waiting for fluency and start living in it, even if it's not perfect yet. And that's what I want you to experience. Not someday, but starting today. Let me leave you with this thought. The next time you finish watching a video or listening to a podcast, don't just move on. Pause, reflect, say something, write something, share something. Turn what you learned into something you can use. That's how you unlock the next level of your English. Let's talk about something that many learners don't realize is slowing down their progress. It's not a lack of talent. It's not about not knowing enough grammar. It's not even about fear. It's about this simple truth. Speaking English once a week isn't enough. I know that might sound a bit strong, but I want to be real with you today. Because if you've been studying English for a while, if you've taken courses or joined conversation classes but still feel stuck, this might be exactly why. Let me give you an image. Imagine you're trying to learn how to play the guitar. You pick it up once a week, play a few chords, maybe follow along with a video tutorial, then you put it down and wait another 7 days before you try again. Would you expect to get really good at it? Probably not. Now think about English. Speaking a language is a skill, just like music, cooking, or any kind of sport. It's not just knowledge. You can't store it in your head and expect it to grow by itself. You need to use it. And you need to use it often. I've met so many learners around the world who say, I understand English, but I can't speak. And when I ask how often they speak, the answer is usually something like, Well, I have a class on Saturdays. Or I speak when I travel, or only when I'm asked to in meetings. And that's the problem. Speaking once a week or even once every few days is not enough for your brain to build fluency. Fluency comes from frequency. The more often you speak, the more natural it becomes. You don't need to talk for hours. You don't need a native speaker or a perfect setting. What you need is consistency. Just 5 minutes a day can change everything. Let me tell you about Malik, a university student from Cairo. He used to practice English once a week in a group class. But outside of class, he stayed in his native language. No English during the week, no reading, no speaking, no writing. After 6 months, he felt like he was stuck in the same place. His vocabulary had grown a little, but his speaking confidence was the same. So we tried a simple experiment. I told him, Malik, every morning, I want you to speak to yourself in English for 5 minutes. Just talk about what you're doing, what you're going to wear, what you're planning for the day, how you feel. No pressure, no perfect sentences, just talk. He felt a little silly at first. He said, Julia, it's strange talking to myself like that. But he did it. Every day. For 1 month. And then something amazing happened. He messaged me and said, I had a conversation with a tourist at the museum today. I didn't freeze. I didn't search for words. I just spoke. It felt so natural. That's what happens when you speak more often. Your brain stops panicking. It starts recognizing the rhythm of the language. You begin to trust yourself. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present. When you speak every day, even to yourself, you stop waiting for the right words. You start reaching for the words you already have. And with practice, your brain becomes faster at finding them. Your mouth becomes more comfortable saying them. It becomes less about translation and more about expression. One of my favorite suggestions is to narrate your routine. You wake up? Say what you're doing in English. I'm brushing my teeth now. I need to get dressed. I feel tired today. It's basic, but it's powerful, because it turns your thoughts into English. You create a habit where your brain connects actions with language. That's how children learn, and it still works for adults. Another great tool is voice recording. Take your phone, hit record, and talk for 1 minute. You don't need a script. Just talk about your day. What happened, what you're thinking, what you're planning, then listen back. Not to judge yourself, but to notice your progress. Are your ideas flowing more easily than last week? Are you using new words without realizing it? That's real growth, and it starts with frequency. Let me share another example. Elena, a graphic designer from Warsaw. She used to feel nervous speaking in meetings even though she knew all the right words. Her company offered 1 English class per week, and she never missed a session. But that 1 hour wasn't enough. Her progress was slow and her confidence was low. I suggested she start a daily mirror talk. Every night before bed, she would stand in front of the mirror and talk to herself for 2 minutes. She didn't correct her grammar. She didn't stop to think too much. She just spoke. Within weeks, Elena started noticing changes. Her voice was more fluid. Her sentences felt more natural. She started participating in meetings without waiting to be invited. Her colleagues noticed too. They started asking her to lead small updates. What changed? Not her vocabulary. Not her grammar. What changed was how often she practiced. She built fluency little by little with short daily moments of real speaking. So if you're listening to this and thinking, but Julia, I don't have time, I hear you. Life is busy. But let me ask you this. Do you have 5 minutes? Not a perfect 5 minutes, just 5 imperfect minutes. While you make coffee, while you take a walk, while you sit in traffic, those minutes are gold. Use them. Talk to yourself. Think out loud. Pretend you're explaining something to a friend. Your brain won't care if it's real or not. It just wants to practice. And here's one more thing. The less often you speak, the more pressure you feel each time. If you only speak English once a week, that moment becomes too important. You want to sound smart. You want to say everything right. You don't want to make mistakes. But when you speak daily, those fears shrink. Speaking becomes normal. Mistakes feel smaller. your brain learns to relax. So if you want to move forward, speak more often. Not longer, just more often. 5 minutes. A day is more powerful than 1 hour once a week. This isn't about adding pressure. It's about making English part of your life, not just part of your schedule. Because the more often you use it, the more it belongs to you. And the more it belongs to you, the more naturally it comes out when you need it. Let your English practice be a part of your everyday rhythm. It doesn't have to be big, it just has to be regular. That's the secret no one tells you. Fluency is not about time. It's about timing. And the best timing is daily. Even in small, simple ways. Speak to yourself. Whisper your ideas. Narrate your life. Make English part of your voice, not just part of your memory. That's when you'll start to feel real change. Let me ask you something, and I want you to be honest with yourself. When you sit down to study English, are you reviewing things you already know? Are you going over the same grammar rules again and again, hoping that this time they'll stick better or somehow make you speak more fluently? I get it. It feels productive. It feels safe. But if you're always staying in that safe zone, you're not really moving forward. You're reinforcing what's already comfortable, instead of stepping into what actually builds fluency. I see this all the time. Learners tell me, Julia, I study English every day. I do exercises, I watch videos, I know the grammar. And when I look closer, they're still doing the same unit in the same book. They're reviewing the present perfect for the 5th time. Or they're rewatching beginner-level YouTube videos because they feel good about understanding everything. But here's the problem. Understanding everything might feel nice, but it doesn't challenge your brain. It doesn't create the confusion and curiosity that lead to real learning. It's like going to the gym and lifting the same 5-kilo weights for a whole year. Sure, you're showing up, and that's good. You're staying consistent. But your muscles aren't getting stronger. Why? Because they're not being pushed. Your body adapts to the effort you give it. And your brain works the same way. If you keep feeding it the same input, the same easy exercises, the same grammar drills, it has no reason to grow. It's already comfortable. You're staying in maintenance mode, not learning mode. This isn't about pushing yourself until you feel lost. I'm not telling you to jump into something way too hard. That can feel frustrating and overwhelming. What I'm saying is this: choose something just a little bit harder than what you're used to. Find that edge, that line between what you know and what challenges you. That's the sweet spot for learning. Let me give you a practical example. Say you're used to reading English news articles written for learners. That's great. You've built a solid foundation. Now it's time to stretch. Try reading a real news article written for native speakers. You might not understand every word, and that's okay. Your goal isn't perfection, it's exposure. Your brain will start noticing new sentence structures, different ways to express ideas, and vocabulary in real context. That's how learning happens. Or maybe you usually listen to this podcast and feel confident following along. That's wonderful. But now, try listening to a podcast for native speakers. Maybe something with interviews, natural conversations, or even storytelling. You don't need to catch every word. Let yourself get lost a little. Let your brain work harder. That discomfort you feel, that's your brain learning. That's where growth lives. Let me tell you about Diego from Buenos Aires. He was an intermediate learner who could write emails, follow instructions at work, and even make small talk with tourists. But he felt like he wasn't improving anymore. When I asked him what he was studying, he showed me his notebook. Page after page of grammar exercises he had already mastered. Conditionals, passive voice, phrasal verbs. He knew the rules better than most native speakers, but he couldn't hold a real conversation without hesitation. So I challenged him. I said, stop reviewing grammar for a week. Instead, listen to one podcast episode a day from a native speaker channel. Don't pause, don't translate, just let it play. And after that, record yourself talking about what you understood, even if it's just one idea. He felt uncomfortable at first. He said, "Wow, Julia, I miss my grammar book. I don't feel in control." But after a few days, something shifted. He started recognizing phrases without thinking. He started speaking with more confidence. He started trusting his instincts instead of relying on rules. That's the kind of transformation that happens when you leave your comfort zone and reach just a little higher. You don't have to abandon what you already know. That's your base. But don't stay stuck there. If you always stay with what's easy, you'll get stuck in repetition. And repetition without challenge is not growth, it's maintenance. Here's something else to consider. When you learn something new, your brain is forced to work. It has to connect what it already knows with this new piece of information. That's how fluency is built, by making those connections over and over again. And every time you stretch, your brain becomes faster, stronger, and more flexible. You become more confident. Not because you reviewed the same rule again, but because you challenged your brain to think, to guess, to adapt. I know that challenging yourself can feel uncomfortable. I've been there. I've studied other languages too, and it's so tempting to stay in the zone where I understand everything. It makes me feel good. But when I look back, the times I grew the most were the times I felt slightly confused, slightly frustrated, and totally outside my normal routine. That's where the magic happens. You can even create a system for yourself, for every 30 minutes, of something you're comfortable with, like rewatching a grammar lesson. Add 10 minutes of something new and harder. It doesn't have to be a big jump, just something that makes your brain say, wait, what does that mean? That little moment of confusion, that's a doorway. Walk through it. And remember, learning something new doesn't always mean understanding it immediately. Sometimes it means being exposed to it again and again until one day it finally clicks. That's how babies learn language. They don't study. They hear the same sounds in different situations, and slowly they start to make sense of it all. You can do the same. Expose yourself to harder input. Let your brain do the rest. So next time you feel stuck, ask yourself, am I still studying what I already know? Or am I pushing myself, just a little, into new territory? If you're always reviewing the same materials, it's time to level up. Try something unfamiliar. Read a more complex article. Watch a film without subtitles. Try writing about a topic you've never written about before. Even 5 minutes of stretching your skills can have a huge impact over time. Don't let comfort fool you into thinking you're progressing. Growth comes from effort, and effort comes from challenge. Trust yourself. You're capable of more than you think. Just take that next small step forward. Let your brain feel a little unsure. That's the signal that you're on the right path. Keep going. Keep stretching. That's how you turn knowledge into fluency. I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, I'll speak English when I'm ready. It's such a common sentence, and honestly, I used to believe it too when I was learning my third language. That idea of waiting for the perfect moment, for the perfect sentence to form in your head, for the confidence to arrive like magic. It feels logical. You think, once I learn a bit more, once I know how to say this correctly, once I don't make mistakes anymore, then I'll start speaking. But the truth is, it doesn't work like that. Readiness doesn't come before speaking. It comes through speaking. I want you to think about any skill you've learned in life. Riding a bike, cooking a meal, even using a new app on your phone. Did you wait until you had every instruction memorized? No. You jumped in, made some mistakes, figured things out along the way, and improved by doing. It's the same with English. Speaking is not the final step in your journey. It's part of the process. You don't speak because you're ready. You become ready because you speak. Let me tell you about Daria, one of our listeners from Warsaw. She had been studying English for 5 years. Her grammar was great, her vocabulary was rich, and she could understand almost everything she read or heard, but she still didn't speak. When I asked her why, she said, I'm just not ready yet. I'll start speaking when I feel more confident. But confidence doesn't appear out of nowhere. It grows from action. So I gave her a small challenge. Speak to herself for 5 minutes a day, about anything. She could describe what she was doing, talk about her day, or imagine she was giving advice to someone. At first, she felt silly. She told me she was embarrassed even though no one could hear her, but she did it anyway. After a few days, her sentences started flowing more naturally. After 2 weeks, she was speaking without thinking so much. And when she finally joined a language exchange group, she was nervous, but she spoke. Not perfectly, not without hesitation, but she did it. And her confidence? It didn't come before. It came because she spoke. I've seen this again and again. Learners who wait for the right moment never quite find it. There's always one more video to watch, one more grammar rule to review. But learning doesn't happen only in your head. It happens in real time, with real words, real mistakes, and real growth. If you keep postponing your first step, you're building a habit of hesitation. And the longer you wait, the harder it feels to begin. That's why I encourage low-pressure speaking moments. Not presentations, not interviews, just small daily experiences where your brain and mouth start to connect. Talk to your dog while you cook. Explain your plans for the day out loud while you get dressed. Record a short voice message to yourself and listen back, not to judge, but to observe. These moments matter. They build the bridge between knowledge and fluency. There's something magical that happens when you take the pressure off. When you stop expecting every sentence to be correct, you start enjoying the process. You start noticing what you can already do instead of what you're missing. And slowly, you stop being afraid of your own voice. One of my favorite tricks is creating imaginary conversations. I pretend I'm meeting someone for the first time and I go through all the small talk, where I'm from, what I do, how my day is going. Then I take it further. I imagine they ask me about my weekend, my hobbies, my opinion on something I care about, and I respond, out loud, as naturally as I can. I don't worry if I forget a word. I don't stop to fix my grammar. I just speak. And the more I do this, the easier it becomes to speak in real situations. The idea of readiness is often tied to perfection. We tell ourselves, I'll speak when I stop making mistakes. But mistakes are not the enemy. Mistakes are how we learn what works and what doesn't. Think about children. They speak long before they have perfect grammar. They use what they know, they guess, they experiment, and they improve. You have that same ability. You just have to give yourself permission to begin. There's another reason people wait. They're afraid of how others will react. What if they laugh? What if they don't understand me? What if I sound stupid? These fears are real, and I understand them. But most people are kinder than we imagine. If you speak with honesty and effort, people usually respond with patience and support. And even if they correct you or ask you to repeat, that's not failure. That's interaction. That's learning in action. Let me tell you about Ahmed from Cairo. He told me he had never spoken English out loud outside of class. He was worried people would judge his accent. So I asked him, "What's your favorite song in English?" He smiled and told me it was Imagine by John Lennon. I said, "Great, sing it, out loud, right now, just for yourself." He did. And after that, he started speaking lines from movies, then short descriptions of his favorite books. And eventually, he joined a WhatsApp group where learners shared short voice messages. His first message was only 10 seconds long, but it was a beginning, and that's all it takes. The key is to stop waiting. Don't wait for perfect grammar. Don't wait for confidence to arrive first. Don't wait until you feel fully prepared. You can start small. You can start alone. You can start afraid. But start. Speak out loud every day, even if no one is listening. Your voice is your tool, and you need to use it to shape it. There's a saying I love: start before you're ready. Because readiness is not a destination, it's a result of consistent action. Every word you say builds your fluency. Every sentence, even the broken ones, makes you stronger. Don't let the idea of the right time hold you back from the growth that's already available to you. You have the knowledge. You've done the studying. Now it's time to speak, not because you're ready, but because that's how you get ready. I've been there myself, watching someone else speak English so smoothly, with perfect pronunciation, fast sentences, even jokes, and thinking, why can't I speak like that? It's so easy to fall into that trap, especially with social media and online platforms. You scroll through Instagram or YouTube and see people your age, or even younger, who seem to speak effortlessly. They sound confident, natural, even funny. And you start to feel small. You start to wonder what's wrong with you. You think, I've been studying for years, and I still struggle. Maybe I'm just not talented enough. But here's something I want to tell you. Comparison steals your energy, your focus, and your joy. It steals your progress. Most people only show the best version of themselves. When someone shares a video of them speaking English, you don't. See the hours they spent practicing that script, the mistakes they made before recording, or how many times they tried before posting it. You only see the final, polished version. And when you compare your behind the scenes to someone else's highlight reel, it's never a fair comparison. It's like comparing your first painting to someone else's masterpiece after 10 years of practice. Of course, you're going to feel like you're not enough, but that's just an illusion. One of my students, Leandro from São Paulo, used to compare himself to a colleague at work. That colleague had studied abroad and spoke English with an American accent. Every time they were in a meeting, Leandro would feel nervous and quiet. He told me, "What's the point of speaking if I'll never sound like him?" I asked him, "A simple question. Do your clients understand you when you speak?" He said yes. "Do you contribute ideas that help your team?" He said yes again. Then you're already doing what English is supposed to help you do: communicate. The goal isn't to sound like someone else. The goal is to express your thoughts your way. I always tell my learners to track progress like scientists, not like critics. Be curious, not judgmental. Instead of asking, "Why can't I speak like them?" ask, "What did I do today that I couldn't do 6 months ago?" Did you listen to a podcast and understand the main idea? That's progress. Did you write an email in English without using a translator? That's a win. Did you order food in English on your last trip? Another win. We ignore our own growth because we're too busy looking sideways. But real progress isn't always loud. It's quiet. It builds in small moments. Think of learning English like growing a plant. You don't dig it up every day to see if the roots are strong. You water it, give it sunlight, and trust the process. Comparing your plant to someone else's won't make it grow faster. In fact, it'll only make you frustrated. Everyone's plant grows at a different speed, with different challenges. Maybe they had more time, maybe they had better resources, maybe they grew up watching American TV, or maybe, just maybe, they're struggling in ways you don't see. There's another danger in comparing yourself. It kills your motivation. When you constantly feel behind, you stop enjoying the process. You rush, you panic, you try to learn everything at once. But language learning is not a race. It's not about who gets fluent first. It's about building a skill that stays with you for life. And life is long. You don't need to master English in 3 months, you just need to keep going. Let me share something personal. When I was learning French, I joined an online community, and every day people would post videos of themselves speaking. I was inspired at first, but then I started feeling insecure. I thought, my accent is terrible compared to theirs. And I stopped posting. I stopped recording. I even slowed down my practice because I felt like I'd never catch up. But then I realized that I was only hurting myself. Their progress didn't take anything away from mine. In fact, their success could be a reminder of what's possible for me too, if I stay focused on my own path. You have your own strengths. Maybe your pronunciation isn't perfect, but you have a wide vocabulary. Maybe your grammar is still messy, but you can hold a conversation for 10 minutes. Those things matter. And when you pay attention to your own small wins, you create momentum. You start to feel proud instead of discouraged. You start to believe in yourself again. 1 exercise I love is keeping a language journal. At the end of each week, I write down 3 things I did in English that I couldn't do the week before, or 3 things that felt easier than before. They don't have to be big. Maybe I understood a joke in a TV show. Maybe I remembered a new word without checking my notes. Maybe I finally used a phrasal verb correctly in a sentence. When you track these wins, your focus shifts. You stop seeing English as something you're failing at, and you start seeing it as something you're building. Comparison also creates unrealistic expectations. You might think, I've been learning English for 5 years. I should be fluent by now. But what does 5 years really mean? Was it 5 years of daily practice, or just 1 hour a week? Was it active speaking, or just watching shows with subtitles? Learning time isn't just about the calendar. It's about quality, consistency, and mindset. So instead of measuring how long it's taking, measure how much you're improving and how much you're enjoying the journey. And remember, English is not a competition. It's a tool. No one wins for having the best accent or the longest vocabulary list. What matters is how you use English to connect, to grow, to understand the world. Your journey is valid. Your progress is real, even if it's slow, even if no one claps for it yet. You're doing something hard, something brave, something most people avoid. And that already makes you someone to admire, not someone who needs to compare. So next time you hear someone speaking better than you, don't shrink. Learn from them if you can. Get inspired. But don't let their skills erase your own. Your story is unfolding at its own pace, and there's no timeline you need to follow. You are where you are, and that's enough for today. When I first started learning languages, I treated them like school subjects. You know what I mean? Lists of vocabulary, grammar exercises, textbooks with generic dialogues. And for a while, that was fine. It helped me build the basics. But eventually I hit a wall. My motivation dropped and I didn't feel excited anymore. I kept thinking, why am I doing this? That's when I realized something important. The moment a language becomes personal, everything changes. And the same goes for English. If English feels like homework, your brain doesn't want to engage. But if it becomes a part of your real life, something that reflects your interests, your dreams, your daily reality, it suddenly becomes alive. That's when learning becomes natural. I remember working with a learner named Camila from Buenos Aires. She had been studying English for years, but always said she hated it. She thought it was boring and pointless. So I asked her, "What do you love doing?" She told me she was passionate about photography and fashion. So we stopped using the old textbook and started exploring photography blogs and fashion videos, all in English. Within weeks, her energy changed. She was more engaged, she wanted to talk about what she saw, and she even started commenting on international Instagram posts. That's the magic of personal connection. When English becomes a tool to explore your world instead of just a subject, to master, everything shifts. You might be wondering how to do this in your own life. Let's start simple. Think about the things you already enjoy doing. Do you love cooking? Start watching recipe videos on YouTube in English. Follow chefs on social media who speak English. Try reading food blogs and experiment with writing your own recipes in English. It's not about studying. It's about experiencing something you already love, just in a new language. And the beauty of this approach is that you're more likely to remember the vocabulary because it's tied to emotions, curiosity, and fun. Learning words like whisk, bake, or marinate becomes effortless when you're actually using them to make a dish you care about. If you're into fitness, follow English-speaking coaches or workout channels. Listen to motivational talks while you exercise. Learn the words they use, like core, reps, stamina. Breathe deeply. When you start connecting those words to movements in your own body, they stick. You don't have to memorize them. They become part of your experience. You're not just learning English. You're living in English, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day. One of my students, Farah from Casablanca, had always dreamed of working in fashion marketing. She told me she was frustrated because she didn't know how to use English in a way that matched her goal, so we changed her learning strategy. Instead of grammar worksheets, she started following English language fashion podcasts. She read articles from Vogue and Elle, even if she didn't understand every word. She wrote short summaries and shared her thoughts in English with me each week. Slowly, her vocabulary grew. But more importantly, her confidence grew. Because now, English wasn't a distant skill. It was a bridge to her dreams. When English is only a part of your classroom or your exam preparation, it stays limited. It becomes a task. But when it starts showing up in your hobbies, in your curiosity, in your everyday thinking, it becomes part of your identity. And that's when fluency really starts to take root. Not because you studied harder, but because your brain starts seeing English as useful, necessary, even fun. Let me give you another example. If you love traveling, try planning imaginary trips in English. Read hotel reviews, check out local guides, watch travel vlogs. Even if you're not going anywhere soon, this kind of pretend travel trains your brain to use English in a meaningful context. You start to pick up the language of real-life situations. How to check in, ask for directions, order food, talk to locals. That's language with a purpose. You don't have to wait for life to give you English moments. You can create them. If you love writing, start a simple blog or a private journal in English. If you're into video games, switch the language to English and notice the commands, the dialogue, the instructions. If you love movies, watch your favorites in English without subtitles. Or write down your favorite quotes and learn how to say them naturally. The more personal and specific you're learning, the deeper it goes. Even in your daily routine, there are ways to link English to your life. For example, try changing your phone settings to English. It might feel strange at first, but it forces you to interact with common words and phrases, reminders, notifications, battery low. These are small touches, but over time, they add up. Every little moment when English becomes a tool you use instead of a subject you study is a moment of real learning. I've also seen how music can play a powerful role. One learner, Leo from Manila, told me he only started enjoying English when he started translating his favorite songs. He would listen to a line, pause the music, try to write down what he heard, and then check the lyrics. Sometimes he even rewrote the lyrics in his own words. Music made English feel emotional and memorable. For him. He said, "Now when I hear a song in English, I don't just enjoy the music, I understand the story behind it." That's what I mean by making English personal. And this doesn't mean you have to ignore grammar or structure. Those things are still important. But when they exist inside something you care about, they're easier to absorb. Instead of learning conditionals through a worksheet, you learn them through a recipe that says, if you add too much sugar, the cake won't rise. Or through a YouTube comment that says, if I had known about this earlier, I would have tried it sooner. Suddenly, grammar becomes part of a conversation, not a confusing rule on paper. When you make English part of your world, you stop feeling like an outsider. You start building your English identity. You're not just someone trying to learn. You're someone who uses English to explore what you love. And that changes everything. You start to think, this is my English. This is how I express who I am, what I like, what I want to do. And that kind of connection brings so much power and motivation. So if you've been feeling stuck or bored, maybe it's time to stop looking at English as a subject. Start looking at it as a lifestyle, something that grows with you, reflects your interests, and helps you enjoy life in new ways. Make it yours, and you'll never need to force motivation again. It will come naturally, because the language will finally feel like it belongs to you. When learners tell me they feel stuck with their speaking, one of the first questions I ask is, how much English are you actually hearing each day? And I don't mean lessons or slow, artificial audio. I mean real English, spoken naturally, used in everyday situations. Because here's the truth. Listening is the foundation of speaking. If you're not hearing the language regularly, your brain doesn't get the chance to internalize the rhythm, the flow, the melody of how English really sounds. And without that foundation, speaking fluently becomes almost impossible. I've worked with so many learners who spend hours studying vocabulary, practicing grammar, doing writing exercises, but they're barely listening. Maybe 10 minutes. A week of audio, usually in the form of scripted dialogues or slowed-down recordings. That's not enough. It's like trying to cook without ever tasting food. You need to listen to build your instinct for the language. You need to hear how people really talk, not just how textbooks present it. One of my students, Lars from Stockholm, was a great example. He had excellent grammar and a big vocabulary, but when it came to speaking, he was stiff and unsure. His sentences were technically correct, but they sounded unnatural. So we changed his routine. He started listening to English every single day, just 15 minutes at first. Sometimes it was a podcast while making breakfast. Sometimes it was a TV show at night. Within a few weeks, his speaking started to loosen up. He began using contractions naturally, like I'll instead of I will, or gonna instead of going to. Not because I taught him to, because he heard it enough times that his brain adopted it on its own. That's the magic of listening. It teaches you the unspoken rules of the language: intonation, stress, rhythm, connected speech. These are things that can't really be taught in a classroom. You have to absorb them. And the only way to do that is through consistent exposure. The good news is, you don't need hours and hours every day. Just 15 minutes of focused listening can make a big difference. The key is to make it part of your life. You can start your day with a short podcast while brushing your teeth. You can listen to a YouTube video while commuting. You can even just leave English audio playing in the background while you cook or clean. Your brain is always listening, even when you're not actively paying attention. I remember another learner, Hannah from Seoul, who felt intimidated by fast English. She said she could understand slow speech or classroom recordings, but whenever she watched movies or listened to real conversations, it felt overwhelming. So we built a simple habit: 5 minutes of real English audio every day, no subtitles, no pressure to understand every word. At first, it felt frustrating, but over time, she started catching more and more. Not because she was trying harder, but because her ears were adapting. Listening trains your ear the way exercise trains your body. The more you expose yourself, the stronger your listening muscles get. And the stronger your listening gets, the easier speaking becomes. You start to imitate what you hear. You start to feel the rhythm of sentences. You begin to predict how phrases will end. And without even realizing it, your fluency starts to improve. Another important part of this is variety. Don't just stick to one kind of English. Try listening to different accents, different speaking styles. Watch interviews, listen to audiobooks, follow vloggers, explore TED Talks. The more variety you hear, the more flexible your brain becomes. You won't get stuck on one accent or one speed. You'll start to understand English in a wider, more natural way. And don't worry if you don't catch everything. That's normal. You're not supposed to understand 100%, especially at first. Focus on the feeling, the tone, the patterns. You'll be surprised how much you can pick up without understanding every single word. Over time, your comprehension deepens. Words you used to skip over will start to jump out. Sentences will feel more familiar. You'll start recognizing common expressions, and you'll hear them repeated in different contexts. There's also something powerful about hearing English used in real situations. When you listen to a podcast where two people are chatting about their day, it's different from a textbook conversation. It's more alive, more human. You hear laughter, pauses, interruptions. You hear how people really speak. That kind of exposure is priceless. It helps you build not just your listening skills, but your emotional connection to the language. I also recommend shadowing, repeating what you hear right after the speaker says it. This helps train your mouth and your brain at the same time. You don't have to shadow full conversations. Even 30 seconds of a podcast can be useful. Try to match the speaker's rhythm, their tone, even their emotion. It might feel awkward at first, but it's one of the fastest ways to improve your pronunciation and fluency. And again, it all starts with listening. If you're someone who loves stories, audiobooks are a great tool. Pick a novel or a short story that interests you and listen to the narration. Some platforms even let you read along with the text. This combination, reading and listening together, is incredibly effective. It helps your brain connect the sounds with the written words, and it builds your vocabulary in context. What matters most is that you make listening a habit, not a one-time thing, not just on weekends. Daily exposure is what creates momentum. And the beautiful thing about listening is that it doesn't take extra time. You can do it while living your life, while walking, driving, exercising, or relaxing. Turn your environment into an English-rich space. Fill it with the sounds of real conversations, real stories, real people using English the way it's meant to be used. And if you feel frustrated sometimes, if you catch yourself saying, "Why can't I understand this?" That's okay. That's part of the process. Your brain needs time to adjust. Think of it like tuning an instrument. At first, it sounds off. But with enough tuning, the music becomes clear. Your brain is learning to recognize patterns, rhythms, and meaning. Trust that process. So if you've been focused only on reading, or grammar or writing, maybe it's time to ask yourself a simple question. Am I really listening enough? If not, the fix is simple. Start small, stay consistent, and let English become part of your soundscape. Because the more you listen, the more natural English becomes. And when English starts to feel natural, speaking flows much more easily. Listening isn't just practice. It's the doorway to fluency. One of the most common habits I see among English learners is writing long lists of vocabulary words. Sometimes it's a notebook filled with random English terms. Other times it's digital flashcards, carefully organized by topic. And at first glance, it looks impressive. You see pages of new words, and it feels like progress. But here's the problem. If you only learn vocabulary as isolated words, without any real context, it's easy to forget them. You might recognize the word when you read it, but when it's time to speak or write, it disappears. It's like studying puzzle pieces without seeing the full picture. The brain doesn't just need information, it needs connections. I've worked with learners who could tell me the dictionary definition of a word, even its synonyms and root forms. But when I asked them to use it in a sentence, they hesitated. That gap between recognition and usage is where fluency gets stuck. And that gap is created when we learn vocabulary without context. It's not enough to know what a word means. You need to know how it's used, when it's used, and what kind of feeling or situation it fits into. That's what gives the word life in your memory. Think about how you learned words in your first language. You didn't learn them from a list. You heard them in stories, conversations, songs, jokes. You learned hungry, not because someone defined it for you, but because you said it when your stomach growled. You learned tired because you felt it after a long day. The word was connected to your experience. That connection is what made it stick. And that same principle applies to learning English now. If you want vocabulary to stay in your brain, you need to link it to something real, a sentence, a feeling, a moment. So when you come across a new word, don't just write it down. Put it in a sentence that feels personal to you. If you learn the word overwhelmed, don't just write overwhelmed, I'm feeling too much. Try writing, I felt overwhelmed on Monday because I had too many meetings. That sentence connects the word to your real life. It has meaning. It has memory. And that makes it powerful. Another way to add context is through stories. When I teach vocabulary, I love to wrap it into a short story. For example, let's say we're learning the word curious. I could say, Lisa was always curious about the stars. Every night, she'd sit by her window asking questions about the sky. That kind of sentence gives the word a home. You're not just memorizing, curious, and wanting to know more. You're imagining a character, a scene, a feeling. That emotional layer activates your memory in a deeper way. You can do this in your own learning too. Pick a word you want to learn and invent a tiny story around it. It doesn't have to be long, just 2 or 3 sentences. Use the new word naturally. Let it be part of something. This is how you train your brain to use vocabulary instead of just recognizing it. One of my students, Diego from Mexico City, used to memorize 50 new words every week. He worked hard, but he kept forgetting them after a few days. So I asked him to change his approach. Instead of learning 50 words, I asked him to learn just 10, but to use each word in 3 real sentences. And I mean real sentences, not textbook examples. Sentences about his work, his family, his thoughts. Within a month, his vocabulary became stronger. Not because he was learning more, but because he was using the words in meaningful ways. There's also a big difference between knowing a word passively and knowing it actively. Passive knowledge means you understand the word when you hear or read it. Active knowledge means you can use it naturally when you speak or write. Context is what helps you move from passive to active. It's like training a muscle. You have to use it in real situations for it to get stronger. I also recommend reading and listening a lot. Not just studying vocabulary, but actually seeing it used in context. When you read a novel, a blog, or even subtitles in a show, pay attention to how words are used. Notice the sentence structure. Notice which words go together. For example, we say strong coffee, but not powerful coffee. That's something you learn through context. It's not about logic, it's about patterns. And your brain learns patterns best when you see or hear them naturally, not when you memorize them in isolation. Another tip is to use new words immediately. Don't wait. If you learn a new word today, try to use it today. Say it out loud. Use it in a voice message. Write it in your journal. Even if it feels forced at first, the act of using the word locks it into your memory. And the more you use it, the more natural it becomes. One learner I worked with, Salma from Cairo, started keeping a daily word diary. Each day, she picked one new word and wrote a short paragraph using it. At first, it was just a few lines. But after a month, she had 30 new words, each with a personal memory. She told me it was the first time vocabulary felt alive for her. Not just lists, not just definitions, but part of her voice, and that's the goal. You want vocabulary? To become part of your English. Not just words you learned from a book, but words you've used, felt, and owned. That happens through context, through real sentences, through small stories, through emotional connection. I also encourage you to use your senses. When you learn a new word, try to imagine it, visualize it. If the word is storm, picture the clouds, hear the thunder, feel the wind. That kind of mental image helps the word stick. It turns abstract knowledge into something concrete. And it only takes a few seconds to do. You can also use questions to deepen your connection with a new word. Ask yourself, when would I use this word? Have I ever felt this? What's the opposite of this word? Do I know a person who fits this word? These questions create a mental network around the word. The more connections you build, the easier it is to remember and use the word naturally. And finally, remember that you don't need to learn hundreds of words at once. A small number of deeply learned words is more powerful than a large number of forgotten ones. Focus on quality, not quantity. Focus on connection, not collection. Vocabulary isn't just something you store, it's something you live with. Make it part of your world. That's when it starts to work for you. One of the biggest barriers I've seen in my students, especially those at an intermediate or advanced level, is the fear of sounding wrong. I hear it all the time. Julia, I hate how I sound in English. My accent is terrible. People are going to laugh at me. These are not just casual thoughts. They are powerful beliefs that stop people from speaking. And I understand that pain. I've seen learners freeze in conversation, avoid opportunities to speak, or even cancel lessons, all because they were ashamed of their voice in English. But here's what I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart. Your voice is not the problem. Your accent is not the enemy. Your pronunciation does not have to be perfect to be powerful. So many people confuse perfect English with native-sounding English. But those are not the same thing. In fact, most people around the world speak English with an accent. And guess what? That's normal. That's beautiful. English is not owned by one country or one group of people. It's a global language. It's a tool for connection. And the goal is not to erase where you come from. It's to express who you are. If you speak clearly enough to be understood, you are succeeding. You are doing what language is meant to do: connect people. I've met brilliant professionals from Brazil, doctors from Turkey, engineers from Vietnam, entrepreneurs from Nigeria, all of them using English to live and work and grow, each with their own unique accent. Their strength came not from sounding perfect, but from showing up with confidence. I remember a student named Hannah from Morocco who once told me, "I don't want to open my mouth because my pronunciation is ugly." That broke my heart, because her ideas were strong, her vocabulary was rich, and her thoughts were valuable. But none of that mattered if fear kept her silent. I worked with Hannah for several months, and one of the most important shifts we made was not in grammar or vocabulary, it was in mindset. I asked her to record herself speaking for 1 minute a day, just talking about something simple: her morning, a movie she watched, her favorite dish. At first, she cringed when listening to herself. She wanted to delete every recording. But I encouraged her to listen with curiosity, not judgment, to hear her voice as if it belonged to a friend. And something started to change. After a few weeks, she began noticing progress. She still had an accent, yes, but her words were becoming clearer. Her ideas were flowing more smoothly. And more importantly, she started to believe that her voice deserved to be heard. Let me ask you this. Have you ever judged yourself after hearing your English? Have you avoided speaking because you didn't like the sound of your own voice? If yes, I want you to know you're not alone, and I also want to challenge you. Instead of hiding your voice, start honoring it. Instead of aiming for perfection, aim for clarity and connection. That's what matters most. Most native speakers are used to hearing different accents. They don't expect you to sound like them. They just want to understand you and to hear your ideas. Sometimes learners say, "But Julia, what if people don't understand me?" That's a fair question. And yes, pronunciation does matter for clarity. But clarity doesn't mean erasing your accent. It means learning which sounds are most important, practicing rhythm and stress, and getting comfortable with the music of English. And that's a process. That's a journey. It doesn't happen by staying silent. It happens by speaking often, listening deeply, and adjusting over time. One of the most powerful tools you can use is shadowing. That means listening to a short sentence in English and repeating it right away, mimicking the pronunciation, the intonation, the pauses. It's like training your ear and your mouth at the same time. You can do this with podcasts, with YouTube videos, with interviews. Just a few minutes a day helps your pronunciation evolve naturally. And over time, you'll feel more in sync with the rhythm of the language. But even as you improve, I want you to remember, your voice is already enough. Accent does not equal intelligence. A strong accent does not mean weak ideas. You can speak slowly, with pauses, and still be powerful. You can mispronounce a word and still be understood. You can sound different and still make a deep impact. The key is to show up, to use your voice again and again until it starts to feel like home. I want to share something personal. I once learned a new language and felt deeply uncomfortable hearing myself speak it. I recorded my voice for a practice, exercise, and when I played it back, I wanted to delete it immediately. I sounded unsure, awkward, and far from fluent. But with time, I stopped listening for mistakes and started listening for progress. I began to notice, hey, that sentence came out more smoothly today. Or, I used a new word correctly. That shift, focusing on small wins instead of flaws, changed my entire relationship with my voice. You can do the same. Instead of asking, how do I stop sounding bad in English? Try asking, how can I sound clearer today than yesterday? Or, what part of my speaking am I proud of today? Those questions build confidence. They help you grow without shame. Because shame has no place in language learning. You're not supposed to sound like someone else. You're supposed to sound like you, in English. So here's something I ask my students to try. Pick one sentence in English that feels meaningful to you. Maybe it's a quote, a line from a movie, or something you want to tell the world. Record yourself saying it. Don't judge the first version. Just listen. Then say it again, maybe a little slower or clearer. Repeat this 5 times. And then, instead of focusing on what sounds wrong, focus on what sounds better. Give yourself credit. This is what real practice looks like. Not perfect results, but consistent courage. And if someone ever makes a comment about your accent, remember this. Their opinion does not define your ability. Most of the time, people are focused on what you're saying, not how you say it. They care about your message, your energy, your ideas. And if you speak with honesty and confidence, that will always come through, accent or not. Please remember that every time you speak, even if it feels scary, you are training your voice to be stronger. You are stepping into a bigger version of yourself, and you are telling the world, I have something to say. And that matters more than sounding perfect. It matters more than impressing someone else. What matters is showing up. What matters is speaking anyway. One thing I notice a lot with English learners is how quickly they move on from one topic to the next without taking time to review. I understand why this happens. Learning something new feels exciting. It feels productive. You finish a lesson, feel like you've made progress, and then jump to the next video, the next grammar point, the next vocabulary list. But here's what many people don't realize. Without review, that new knowledge doesn't stick. It fades. It disappears. Your brain might hold on to it for a few hours, maybe even a few days, but then it slips away. And that's not your fault. It's just how memory works. Think about it this way. Imagine you're building a house. You lay the first layer of bricks, you're proud, and you move to the next room. But you never come back to make sure that first wall is strong. You never reinforce it. Eventually, the wall starts to crumble. That's exactly what happens when you skip review in language learning. You build layer after layer of new knowledge, new grammar, new vocabulary, new expressions. But if you never return to reinforce those layers, they collapse. You might find yourself thinking, I studied this before. Why can't I remember it? That's the review problem. I've had students tell me they've studied the past perfect 5 times, but still don't feel confident using it. Others say they've written down hundreds of vocabulary words but can't remember them in conversation. When I ask them how often they review those words or grammar points, the answer is usually, I don't, really. And that's the moment when things start to change. Because once you understand the power of review, not as repetition for repetition's sake, but as a strategy to move things into long-term memory, you can completely change the way you learn English. One method I always recommend is called spaced repetition. It's based on brain science, not just good habits. Here's how it works. When you first learn something, your brain puts it into short-term memory. That's like a whiteboard. It's temporary. If you don't review it soon, it gets erased. But if you review it after a short time, say the next day, your brain says, oh, this might be important. It keeps it a little longer. Then if you review it again after 3 days, your brain holds on even tighter. Then after a week, and maybe again after 2 weeks. Each review tells your brain, keep this. I need it. That's how information moves from short-term memory to long-term memory. That's how it becomes part of your fluency. Let me give you a personal example. When I was learning another language, I used to write down every new word I came across. My notebook looked full and impressive, but weeks later I couldn't remember half of those words. So I started using a spaced repetition schedule. On the first day, I'd write the word in a sentence. The next day, I'd read it again and say it out loud. 3 days later, I'd try to use it in a conversation. A week later, I'd quiz myself. And suddenly, the words started to stay. They became familiar, natural. I didn't have to think about them anymore. They were just there, ready when I needed them. You don't need a fancy system to do this. You can use flashcards, apps, a notebook, or even voice recordings. The important thing is the pattern. Review soon after learning, then review again, with reuse, increasing space in between. It only takes a few minutes a day, but the results are powerful. If you learn 5 new words today, don't wait a month to look at them again. Review them tomorrow, then set a reminder to check them again in 3 days, then again next week. You'll be surprised how much more you retain with that simple habit. Now, let's talk about reviewing grammar. A lot of learners avoid grammar. Review because it feels boring or frustrating. But reviewing doesn't mean rereading the same textbook explanation. It can be active. Try taking a sentence you learned in your last class and changing the subject or verb tense. Try teaching the rule to someone else. Or write a short paragraph using the structure. These small acts of retrieval, bringing the information back from your memory, are what make it stronger, and don't underestimate the value of reviewing your mistakes. I always tell my students, mistakes are not the problem. Ignoring them is. When you review what went wrong and why, that's when real learning happens. If you made a pronunciation error in your speaking class, write it down. Listen to the correct version. Say it again the next day. If you confuse 2 verb tenses, make a chart comparing them. Then look at it again in a few days. These little moments of correction, repeated over time, turn your weak points into strengths. Another tip I give is to create a personal review file. It can be digital or handwritten. Every time you learn something you want to remember, a new word, a grammar tip, an expression you liked, add it to the file. Then schedule short review sessions throughout your week. Even 5 minutes a day is enough. During your commute, while brushing your teeth, or waiting in line. Keep the habit light but consistent. Sometimes students worry that review will slow them down, that it's better to keep moving forward. But the opposite is true. Review doesn't hold you back. It makes your progress stronger. If you don't review, you'll keep forgetting and relearning the same things. That's what slows you down. When you review strategically, you build a strong foundation. And with that foundation, you can grow faster, speak more confidently, and feel less frustrated along the way. Think about your favorite athletes or musicians. Do they practice something once and move on forever? Of course not. They return to the basics regularly. They review routines, rehearse movements, strengthen their technique. Why? Because mastery comes from repetition with intention. It's the same with language. You don't need to memorize everything perfectly the first time. You just need to come back to it again and again with care and curiosity. So the next time you finish a lesson or learn a new expression, pause. Ask yourself, when will I review this? Make a plan, even a small one. Write it down. Set a reminder. Keep it simple, but do it. Because what you review, you remember. And what you remember, you can use. That's the key to real fluency. Not racing through material, but revisiting it with purpose. That's how your English becomes part of you, not just something you study. I know what it feels like to be in that strange middle zone where you're not a beginner anymore, but you're also not fluent the way you want to be. You've come far, you've put in hours of study, maybe even years, and you understand more than you used to. But something still feels off. You're not improving as quickly as you did before. You feel like you've hit a wall. And maybe you've started to wonder if this is it. If this is as far as you'll go, I want to tell you something important. Feeling stuck is not the end. It's actually a sign that you're on the edge of a breakthrough. It means your brain is processing, adapting, and preparing for the next level. It's uncomfortable, yes, it's frustrating, absolutely. But it's also a clue that you're ready for more. You've outgrown the beginner tools, the basic routines, the safe habits. Now is the time to push forward, even if it's just a little at a time. I've seen so many learners get stuck at this stage, not because they're not smart enough, not because they don't have time, but because they keep doing the same things that once worked, but no longer help them grow. The truth is, the habits that got you to intermediate won't get you to advanced. You have to change your strategy. That doesn't mean doing more, it means doing differently. A small shift in how you practice, how you think, how you show up, every day, that's what unlocks the next stage of fluency. So I want you to pause and ask yourself, what habit is keeping me stuck? Is it that you're consuming too much and not creating? Are you waiting for the perfect time to speak instead of creating low-pressure speaking moments now? Are you reviewing what you learn or just moving on? Are you connecting English to your real life or treating it like a school subject? Are you listening to English daily or just occasionally? All of these are small but powerful habits, and changing even one can lead to big results. Choose one. Just one. Think back on what we talked about today. Maybe it was the idea of speaking 5 minutes a day to yourself. Maybe it was the idea of using spaced repetition to make things stick. Maybe it was giving yourself permission to sound imperfect but speak anyway. Pick the one that made you stop and think. That one piece of advice that felt personal. That's your starting point. That's your next step. Try it this week. Not forever, just this week. Tell yourself, for the next 7 days, I'm going to focus on this one thing. Set a reminder on your phone. Put a sticky note on your desk. Whatever helps you remember. Don't worry about doing it perfectly. Just do it consistently. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it doesn't matter. What matters is that you show up, that you try, that you break the pattern that's keeping you in the same place. And something amazing happens when you start taking action again. Your confidence grows. You start to feel more in control. You stop waiting for motivation and start creating momentum. One small win leads to another. You understand a podcast without subtitles. You say something in English without translating. You write a message and feel proud of how natural it sounds. These little victories build up. And soon, you're not stuck anymore. You're moving. You're learning again. You're growing. I know this is easier said than done. Life is busy. You have responsibilities, maybe work, family, school. English might feel like just another task on your list. But if you're here, listening, watching, engaging with this community, it means you care. It means you haven't given up. And that's everything. That's what makes the difference between those who stop and those who keep going. You're still here. You're still trying. And that means there's still so much ahead of you. And if this episode helped you, if something I said made you feel a little less alone, a little more motivated, a little more clear, share it. Maybe you have a friend who's also feeling stuck, who's been learning English quietly and feeling like they're not getting anywhere. Send this to them. Tell them what part spoke to you. Tell them you're going to try something new this week and invite them to try with you. Learning doesn't have to be lonely. When we connect with others who are on the same journey, we multiply our progress. That's why I keep showing up here, because I believe in what we're building together. This isn't just a podcast. It's not just English tips and grammar lessons. It's a space where we remind each other why we started, where we keep learning, not just with our heads, but with our hearts, where we get to be real about our struggles and still celebrate our growth. Every time you listen, every time you apply something new, every time you take even a small step, you're building something powerful. So if you're feeling stuck right now, know that you're not broken. You don't need a miracle solution. You just need a moment of clarity, a shift in direction, and the courage to try again. Pick your one habit. Start today. Keep it simple. Keep it real. I'll be right here, cheering you on, every step of the way.